For more on this story, I'm joined by Professor Kim Rubenstein from the University of Canberra. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks very much, Patricia.
The Solicitor General is being asked for advice on what Christian Porter can work on as part of his portfolio, given his defamation action against the ABC. How unusual is this? Is there a precedent for this?
Look, I think it's really interesting. Last December, Senator Amanda Stoker was given responsibilities as Assistant Attorney General, second woman to take on responsibilities of the Attorney General. And in some ways, this question is highlighting how valuable shared roles as ministerial roles are something that I would be interested in pursuing further, but not for these reasons, Patricia. I think the conflict of interest aspect of the minister here is one that is of serious concern in terms of his capacity to fulfil his responsibilities as Attorney General.
So given there clearly is a conflict of interest issue, the government's identified it, if there is areas carved out, as they've said, does that settle the issue?
Look, I don't think it settles the issue in terms of questions of ministerial responsibility. How will that work in the cabinet room? We have a system of collective responsibility where ministers deliberate together. Will he recuse himself from deliberations over matters to do with the federal court? Indeed, the appointments that he's made to the federal court since the coalition have come into power, all of the appointments, for instance, in Melbourne, the 9 appointments have been all men. Any future decisions about appointments to the federal court, having to recuse himself and then a collective decision being made, it makes for a very difficult unpacking of ministerial responsibility. So it would be one thing to share the load and have a woman and a man as Attorney General, which I think is a great idea going forward, but they both have to be collectively responsible for every decision. This Attorney General can't be responsible for decisions that the Federal Court Act placed directly for his concern. There are 24 mentions of the Attorney General in the Federal Court Act in terms of responsibilities under the Act. That can't be fulfilled while he is Attorney General, and even if an Assistant Attorney General fulfills them, the whole Cabinet is compromised by his position as a member of the Cabinet.
So just to be clear, you're saying that even if there is a delegation to others on these issues, this still, in your view, puts the entire Cabinet at risk over these issues?
I think it raises serious questions about collective responsibility, yes, because he is still a member of that Cabinet and it complicates it for that issue.
How about if he does recuse himself, as you say, over federal court issues, over any deliberations on the ABC, he leaves the room? Would that settle it?
Well, it settles it in terms of the notion of him not directly participating, but I do think it really clouds the issues for our system of constitutional ministerial responsibility and the political representation that makes to the community more broadly. And then I think that there are real questions in terms of his capacity to continue in that role for any aspect of his for the next 2 years, because this defamation matter will continue for a significant period of time. We have a system of open courts, which means that each of the steps along the way will be open, although I should say this Attorney General closed the courts for the Bernard Cleary and Witness K case. So not all cases are open, which is a concern for the rule of law in this country, but his case will definitely be open, and at each step the entire community will be seeing the affidavits of various people involved. So again, there are real questions about the capacity for him as the minister responsible for the federal court, even if he's not involved. His own action will be clouding the political issues that are relevant to all aspects of that collective cabinet. And I think that's a second issue that is of real concern. I think the third issue, Patricia, is in relation to the costs involved in running this. He, as an individual, is bringing this action, and if he's unsuccessful, he would be responsible for the costs of the ABC in running this matter. So there are real questions about the lines there in relation to his and the government's support of him in relation to this action. So I think there are...
Just to clarify there, if he is unsuccessful, some of this is hypothetical, but of course we We have to talk in the hypothetical before
Yes.
it happens.
Yes.
And he is liable, let's say, and to pay damages to the ABC. He'd be paying those. What impact would that have on the government?
Well, it would be a question in terms of questions that would have to be asked. Is he able to manage those costs, which would be significant? And in terms of his role as a member of the government, I guess there are questions that would be interesting to ask of him and of the Prime Minister in terms of where the lines are drawn as to his individual defamation action and his continued role as a minister in the government.
The government has appointed judges and overseen significant structural court reforms.
Yes.
How will this impact the Christian Porter case?
Well, I think there are questions, as we said earlier, in terms of this, his advice for the appointment of judges. So, in terms of any conflicts in that relation, in relation to that, and I do want to repeat again that the appointments are 9 men, only men over the last 9 appointments. The last woman appointed was 2013. But anyone who is appointed by this government, there'd be, judges are completely independent, but the appearance of conflicts, of course, is of interest here. But then there's also about law reform. This attorney spoke to the National Press Club about there's a need for reform in terms of defamation law. How will he continue to be a minister involved with the deliberations with attorneys general from each of the different states on defamation law reform when he himself is involved in a defamation action at this very time? So again, that's another area that he would have to recuse himself from. So there are just such extensive aspects to his role as Attorney General that are compromised by his continued involvement now that he has initiated these proceedings.
That's a really interesting point you make on defamation law, because the government, through Christian Porter, has signalled it believes that defamation law needs reform.
Yes.
If he remains Attorney General, does it effectively stall any potential to reform defamation law?
Well, I think that certainly his continued involvement is compromised in terms of that. Now, whether Amanda Stoker, as his Assistant Attorney General, can progress those, and whether as a collective cabinet the public have enough trust that she can progress those on his behalf without in any way feeling compromised by her fellow cabinet members' personal position. Because as I said earlier, we're talking about collective responsibility. Individuals become part of the collective in relation to ministerial decisions. So I think that there are serious questions on that front.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Professor Kim Rubenstein from the University of Canberra there.